Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this midweek ag weather update for Farm Credit brought to you by Nutrient Ag Solutions. Reason I'm coming to you here at the middle or end of this week here is because this Sunday, Monday, I'm going to be out. My wife and I are celebrating our 20th anniversary, so we're going to be gone. And I want to make sure to get you some weather information before I left. So take a look. This is what happened in the day on Wednesday. We did see kind of circulating around this bigger high pressure cell a lot of individual thunderstorm clusters. Some of them put down some very heavy rainfall. While this was occurring, a big storm cluster to the north went over parts of the eastern Great Lakes, delivering a lot of severe weather. Big storms popped in the midsection of the country here, including a big hailer up here in parts of Manitoba. But you can also see some of the western wildfires that are showing up. And I want to really bring that to your attention because the pattern that we're about to slide into here is going to be one that features an expansive ridge that stretches from the west all the way across the south. And that's going to influence our temperature patterns coming up. But I need to put this in the context of some recent precipitation. So through early this morning here, this is what I've got in terms of total accumulated rainfall through the beginning of this week. And we talked earlier back on Monday morning about isolated storm events coming across parts of AgSouth's territory. And we can now see where some of the storms hit. But you can also see that more locations missed on this than got it. Now, parts of Minnesota, come back to the Corn Belt, getting into Wisconsin, right here in Michigan. This was an area that needed a lot of rain, and some places did get it, although there was quite a bit of hail in this as well. So just kind of keep your eye on this, because as we walk through this upcoming forecast, the precipitation patterns here as we finish July going into August are typically very critical for a lot of our crops. So my next map stitches together kind of a time series of what we've seen as of late in 1 week chunks. So this one right here looks at the last 7 days. And as we just kind of get an idea about where the rainfall has and has not been in the last week, this starts to show these areas that have got some flash drought risk. So what I'm talking about here is, let me take this same map and get rid of everything less than 1/2 of an inch, because we can easily evaporate a 1/2 inch of rain in about a day and a half. So now we start to see most of North Carolina, central parts of South Carolina. Look at this chunk right in here in parts of Georgia have really missed out on some of the heavy rainfall as of late. Now let's add on another week to this and go back to the last 14 days. And now we can really start to see those areas showing up. So I'm talking here, in through here, and right in through this part of Georgia. Now, there are pockets along the coast that have been drier, but some places have caught those bigger thunderstorm events, and that's been a real boom for the crop in those areas, but other places have not. It is important to note how hot and dry it's been in Texas, also parts of Oklahoma as of late. And then you can also see this corridor in through here in the Corn Belt that's been very, very dry as well, needing a lot more thunderstorm activity in here to kind of ensure the remainder of the season will go well for this area. We're going to come back to that in a second. But I said I wanted to add another week onto it. This is what I've got month to date for July. Forgive me. We're going to talk about August at the very end of this, and even September and October too. But I want to show you the month to date for July, because these particular climate reporting districts we keep identifying here are showing up on the drier side of things. Some of them having a top 30 or top 40 driest such starts to any July going back to 1893. Now, this just for context, because we're overall looking at how this late season kind of short-term drought situation is going to be affecting our crops. So one of the things I'll be watching carefully over the next couple of weeks is going to be this. So I've shown you this in the past. This is satellite-derived NDVI. So that's Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. And what it typically does is it just tells us the health of the crop from space. Now, Georgia, we've been at the top of the distribution for a while, but this is only through, the beginning of the third, really through middle of July. Let's call it that, because it's the previous 8 days that's included in this number. Now, what I'll be concerned about is if some of those areas that have been drier as of late and may not be picking up precipitation in the near term start to drop this NDVI value off a bit. Okay, so it's very high now, well above the historical average, but we need to keep an eye on that. There are some really dry and hurting pockets in the state of Georgia. Same thing for South Carolina, although we're much closer to our climatological normals for NDVI. And that story continues up into North Carolina as well. So I just wanted to show you the latest data, because later on this month and early next month, I'm going to show you, I guess early next month, because that'll be my next video for you. We're going to take a look at how this panned out for the end of July here. I imagine these numbers are going to start to come down in certain spots. So do we have chances for storms going forward? Well, as I played this out through the day on Thursday, isolated storms in the Appalachian Mountains. We're going to watch carefully the upper Midwest for some nasty storms late this week, possibly some damaging storms into this area. But for us, we're going to get through the next 2 days with relatively dry conditions and very hot conditions throughout much of the southeast getting up to North Carolina. So this is through the day on Friday. See some isolated storms coming through here possible, but overall, most folks are going to be dry as the heat comes on. Now, getting into the weekend, there's a front that's coming through here that's going to increase our chances for some storms, but you look at it overall, and this is what the map looks like for the next 7 days. The main corridors of activity roll over the top of this ridge. So you see the ridge is sitting here. It expands a bit east to the west, right in through there. And what we end up getting is some isolated convection, but overall, this is not a wet pattern for us. It's much wetter here and to our north, all right? So let's look at some probability maps to kind of see how this works. This is just looking at the chance over the next 10 days of grabbing an inch of rainfall. Now you notice that the model has kept the highest probabilities along the coast. So better than a 50% chance everywhere east of that line I just drew there. That's primarily driven by the sea breeze. That's primarily driven by the proximity to the moisture and just the normal daily convective events that happen along the coast. But again, don't look at this and assume that everywhere in here has a really high chance of getting quite a bit of that moisture. Because if I flip this over and look at the chances of getting less than that, you start to see that there's some drier air that's trying to work its way in as the ridge really opens into this region. One thing to point out back to that 1-inch probability map, much of the upper Midwest, the Corn Belt, getting back here into the plains, is going to see a lot of storm complexes. These are not going to be ubiquitous. They're not going to cover everybody, but there are better chances of storms rolling through this particular area going forward, while Texas, big section of our Cotton Belt, is going to be quite dry through this pattern. Speaking of the pattern, this is what it looks like. To start off August, there's an expansive ridge here. And as we just play this forward into the first week of August, that ridge has slid pretty far to the south. And that means we're going to have to worry about the heat that could be coming from this despite having troughs of low pressure to the north. So up the eastern kind of coast here, there's going to be a pretty wide contrast in temperatures, quite cool in New England and very hot down in the southeast. As we just play this out here through the first week of August and beyond, we do expect that ridge to just live down here. So what we expect to see out of this is a lot of thunderstorm clusters here that could make their way into our area, but it's not the strongest signal for us being overly wet. Now I do want to show you the multi-model analysis for that time frame, and you notice that the CPC has got the best chances of bringing those storms through, and this is echoed by the European model. So the week 2 could possibly be stormy here, but I don't want to go into this thinking that we're going to fill in all those holes and just make ubiquitous rainfall for everybody, okay? I just want to be aware that we could run the risk of having a few of these regions miss out on this precipitation, and that's why I wanted to focus on where those regions were going into this time period. Now from there, if we just go out and have a look at what's going on beyond this, I want to take you to the temperature side of things. Because let's get an update on this. Yeah, through early this morning, we do have a lot of heat that's to our west, and we can see the heat advisories, watches, warnings to our north. And this does include some of these counties in North Carolina. Around Atlanta, this is an air quality issue that you see here. And if we just take a look at what these temperatures are expected to do, it's a hot one today. Mid-90s through much of the territory. Let's go from there into Friday. Same scenario. Very hot, though, in the central U.S., centered around Missouri. Temperatures well over 100 Fahrenheit through the end of this week. We slide into the weekend, much warmer than normal, about 5 to 8 degrees warmer than normal through here. We're normally in the upper 80s, maybe touching 90. Here we are seeing these high temperatures possibly getting into the mid to upper 90s. Sunday, the front tries to get down there, but doesn't quite make it, so we still stay above average. This is into Monday, near normal in Raleigh, but still hot in Georgia. And getting into next week, Tuesday into Wednesday, the heat still sticks around because of where that ridge placement is. So to show you what we're concerned about for the first 10 days or so of August, this is a map showing you where the Climate Prediction Center's got the risk of excessive heat. As you notice, this does include most of AgSouth territory having at least a slight and then a moderate risk of that heat. And to kind of put it in one final form here, I want to show you a 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. You do notice that when you get out there at the beginning of August, like we just talked about, we could get a little cooler air here, but overall much of the rest of AgSouth territory stays quite hot, and it kind of just centers itself where that ridge placement is expected to be to begin the month. So we start the month of August warm, and it looks like we'll go through the first maybe 10, 11 days of it warm, and that could stick around. Now, the big wild card this time of year is always going to be the tropical systems that could form. And right now, we're keeping an eye out on the Atlantic. It's trying to kick off another potential, what we call African easterly wave, that they've currently given a 40% chance of developing. You remember back on Monday, I showed you that system that was possibly going to develop here and move out. That's been taken out of the forecast. So we were not overly concerned about it, but we know that that is now not really a factor going forward. So what is a factor is this next system. And I really want to show you this animation to make one point very clear. The position of our Bermuda High is here. That's what's shown in the color shading in the background. And the Bermuda High starts off elongated and then stretches just like this as this tropical system, should it form, curls around it. So as a result, we don't see anything coming into our Gulf Coast or along our East Coast here for the next 7 to 10 days. But as you all know, the ocean temperatures there are quite hot, and therefore we have to be very aware of anything, just any grouping of tropical thunderstorms. Should they get close to the coast, both here and down in the Gulf, they have the potential to come across and really deliver a lot of rain. Now, let's take that and just start thinking about other factors. This is an animation. It's going to restart for you here that goes back to the very beginning of it, the end of June, and goes through. This is a 30-day animation, so the end of June to the end of July. And during that time frame, we've talked about this, but we saw very warm water showing up here. Big high pressure cells set up that area, slowed down the upwelling, a lot of sunshine, and the ocean temperatures went from cool to some places now 10 degrees Celsius above average. The entire time we've maintained a lot of warm water in the main development region. And we know, you probably heard in the news, some of the heat that has been down here around Florida with ocean temperatures in some places getting up above 100 Fahrenheit, just in a few spots south of Florida. The cooler water that you're seeing right in through here, watch it again at the end of this animation, that's just Don. Remember Tropical Storm Don? Probably didn't care too much about it because it didn't affect the U.S. coast, but right there is some of the cold water trailing from it. Now, I actually want your attention over into this ocean because El Nino continues to develop, but watch right here. See that colder water? Watch it fade. The Gulf of Alaska is getting warmer, and what that is a signal for is more ridging in the western United States, which means flow doing something a bit more like this. And that can lead to a stormier August pattern at times. But this El Nino might be really taking over. And I want to show you what I mean by that, because the couple of things to look at here. The ocean temperatures continue to climb in that region, and we have quite a bit. Let's blow this up and restart it here. We've got quite a bit of warm water beneath the surface. So this is going down in the ocean from Indonesia to South America. There's a lot of warm water that still needs to surface in this area, which is only going to happen if the trade winds continue to back off. And they're expected to do that. I mean, the latest update here from the European model, do you see this kind of shading here of this blue-green? That tells me that with time, going from July 27th to August 11th, that we're going to start to put the MJO closer to the Pacific Ocean. And there'll also be a reflection of that right here in this part of the Indian Ocean in Africa. And you say, well, what does that mean? It only does that if we can get some stronger westerly winds there. And you see the reds that are showing up in this quadrant? That means the trade winds have a westerly component to them. Normally the trade winds blow east. This is what El Nino does. And it has stitched this all together. So you say, why are you telling me this? I'm telling you this because it's all going to influence the jet stream. And this is what it's been up to. So far in the month of July, we started to see stronger than normal winds emerge here and here. Now, you can look at all these other places and talk about it, but I'm focused on these two areas because over the coming days and weeks, we see the models beginning to develop a stronger subtropical jet. It's right in through there. That is what El Nino does. If you say, Eric, just tell me what El Nino, it does this. It cranks up the subtropical component of the jet. Now, if you're south of it down here, you're hot and dry. If you're along it, storms coming through this area. And what we want to know is, see this right here? Does that influence the position of any tropical system to come into the south, to come into the southeast, to hit AgSouth's territory? Because if the jet stays north, it just kind of opens this corridor for any tropical system to get there. But it's going to keep us hot and sticky and humid going into the end of the season. Now, we expect this to stay like this throughout winter as well, which means winter will be very active if this sets up like this. I know that's looking way, it's midsummer, but I'm looking out there to see what could happen. But before I go much farther, I would like to show you this. Now, we have records going back to the 1950s of every El Nino or La Nina event. And you see the list of years I put in these boxes? These are all years where El Nino developed in summer. So I'm going to show you, if you stack them all up and make a composite map, what they did in the month of August. So you'll notice that August, in all those previous years, was drier. And I am concerned about that. Now remember, in last video I said there are no long-term indications of drought developing. And we just saw that the latest forecast, I'm going to go back and show it to you again real quick. It's this one right, nope, here, sorry. We just saw that the week 2 forecast is trying to keep a corridor stormy in through here. So there aren't any near-term indications of this happening. But I wanted to point out that historically, August was a drier month if an El Nino was developing. Now, why don't I think this is going to be the case? Because this particular year, the ridge is going to sit here and at times kind of meander back in this direction and over in this direction, which means we're going to see storms cascading over the top. And given this kind of placement of the ridge, there is the potential for tropical systems to kind of roll in this area in August. So the risk is there because of history, but the near-term forecast is not showing it. And I'm going to show you that in another way here in a few moments. But before, let's go do it now. This is from our latest update from the Climate Prediction Center. They don't have it. They actually have more of an influence of that jet stream looking really like, El Nino-like into our area. And I want you to go to this website, cpc.ncep.noaa.gov tomorrow, or just Google CPC, because on Friday they'll update their new week 3, week 4 outlook, which they're currently calling for above average precipitation. So I'm showing you this because right now the thinking is we will not have an August that's going to be a perfect analog to this. But we just ask, well, what about the months that follow? So why don't we just go have a look at September? Now, September being the peak of the hurricane season, take a look. It's now got drier risks along the coast, but very wet into this area. Again, I've got to call a big question mark on this because of how warm the water is here and how warm the water is there. Should anything get in here and disrupt this by producing a tropical system, we could wipe that out in a heartbeat. And as we go from there into the month of October, let's just flip one more month here. This is the latest composite update historically about this. And we could be wetter during that time frame with maybe only the coastal areas being drier. Now I'm showing you the analogs so that you can compare it to the new forecasts that have come out from the CPC, which will come out tomorrow. And I'm going to finish with one last thing. I'm going to go here and go to one of my favorite sites, weatherbell.com. And what I want to show you is they just updated these. So let's come in here to maps. We're going to click on the European weeklies. And we're going to look at precipitation totals on a 30-day stretch. And we're going to take this out there to the month of August. Now, everything I just showed you goes in the face of what the Climate Prediction Center is showing and what the European model is showing, which is not for drought development. I wanted just to make a case today that there is risk because of historical precedent. And we know at the beginning of this that I talked about the fact that we had seen some drier conditions as of late. So I've said this 100 times, but I've been told every time I come into the Southeast that drought's only a week away. So I want to be aware of these areas, keep an eye on the upcoming precipitation patterns, and understand how El Nino might influence August, which is why we covered that. All right. Hey, thanks for letting me have next Monday off, and we'll talk again the following Monday. Have a good one. Thank you.